All right, so let's just start off with your name.
John Francis Aloysius Anthony Xavier Smith Jr., alias Whitey. I grew up in southeast Portland on 73rd and Steel Street. And I went to Franklin High School for 2 years, then they built Marshall. And I went to Marshall for junior and senior year and graduated from there. And before all that, I went to Marysville Grade School. I like to swim a lot. That's why I got the name Whitey, because I always swam at the Mount Scott Park and my hair turned white when I was 8 or 9 years old. And I was on the swimming team there, along with the basketball team and the softball team. And when I was in the 6th or 7th grade, we started watching American Bandstand on television on rainy days, where when we came home from school, we'd watch it, you know. And then Portland got High Time, and all us guys thought the only way we can really get friendly with girls is to learn how to dance. So we all went to dancing school with the girls. House of Leon and different places had dancing schools for like $10 or $15 for the whole term. And that's where we all got enough guts up to dance with girls, because we were always real bashful. And then they had High Time on television, which was just like American Bandstand. So you just danced to different records and all that. But then once in every day they'd have a dance contest. And my 8th grade year, I'd take a bus downtown and go to High Time at the Channel 12 studio and dance there. And one time I won on a daily, and I told them I was a freshman at Franklin. And they had me come back for the weekly or the monthly one 2 weeks later, and I won that one too. And as far as they knew, I was a freshman at Franklin, and that was one of my main things, because I knew how to dance, and I danced good, so that way I got to meet a lot of girls, and that was the main thing right there, you know. When I got into college, my freshman and sophomore year of college, they had a lot of teenage nightclubs here, and I wasn't old enough to go to a regular nightclub, so I went to the teenage nightclubs. And this one time, this one guy, a friend of mine, Jim, wanted to go to this one nightclub, and he had a 6-pack of beer in the back of his car. And I drank one beer, and we went dancing, and then at this, what's called, it wasn't the Headless Horseman, that was one of them, but the Longview, I asked my wife, Marilyn, what was the name of that teenage nightclub on McLaughlin? Huh? It wasn't the Longhorn, was it? Anyway, we went to this nightclub and we danced until like 2 o'clock in the morning. We went out to get in our car, or his car, and this security guy stopped us and called the state police and had us arrested, because they knew we were teenagers, because we had to show our identification to get in that place. And we were only like 19 years old, and I had to spend the night in jail. And then my dad came to get me the next morning, and he took me back a week later to the judge, and the judge said, "Young man, you either have to go in the armed services or go to jail." And I didn't know it at the time, but it was against the law for him to even say that. But really? Yeah, that's an ultimatum. You're supposed to do one, not just, you know, he's supposed to say what happens to you, not what you want to have happen to you, you know. But anyway, that didn't make any, you know, at that time I didn't know it was against the law. And so I ended up joining the United States Army. And that was the best thing that ever happened to me. He really had his head straight where I didn't. And I spent 3 years in the Army, 6 months here in the United States and 2.5 years over in Germany. I was a aviation mechanic and crew chief. Yeah, I was a car mechanic before that, you know, just on my spare time, because I was 19 years old and I had owned almost 19 cars by that time, so I knew how to work on cars. And I figured a more advanced thing would be to work on airplanes. Yeah, and I signed up for that, and what that was just first and second echelon work. That's not real hard mechanics. I just checking the oil and looking for bad things that happen to the thing or cracks in the skin and checking the propellers and all that, you know.
Okay.
And if you find anything really bad, you'd have to write it up and then somebody else would fix it. It wouldn't be the crew chief. Yeah, they had real good beer. I mean, one beer would make me silly just about, you know, because it had a lot more alcohol in it than what the United States did.
Right. So,
And good taste, too. Oh, I was like 60 miles south of Warrisburg and 30 miles north of, no, 60 miles south of Frankfurt and 30 miles north of Warrisburg. So we were right smack dab in the middle of Germany,
oh, okay.
north and south looking at it, you know. Then I got to go to Berlin. And I went through Checkpoint Charlie to go over to East Berlin and saw East Berlin while the wall was still there. That was pretty neat. And then I also got to go to southern Germany to Garmisch. That's where some of the Olympics were held earlier, you know, in the year, not that year, but I mean earlier in Olympic time. My mom kept sending letters to me and saying, as long as you're in Europe, you might as well see as much as you can. And I went to those places, and then we came back up through France and went to Paris, and then up through Belgium and Luxembourg, and came down to Germany. That was just a 2-week trip there. And then 2 times I went to London. One time I went there to get a Beatles suit, and I did. I got one. The ones like the Beatles wore with the round collar up here, you know.
Okay,
And I was the only guy in our post that had one for a while. And they ended up selling them. And then I went to London again to get a Lotus 7 sports car. I was going to buy that, and they were 6 months behind in production, and I couldn't get it. And they told me about a used one that was in a used car lot, and by the time I got to that used car lot in London, it had already been sold, so I never got one. And then I bought a TR4 in Germany from a sergeant that just had it for a couple of months or so. It was almost like brand new. And so I had a TR4, and that's what I had when I got out of the Army, and I drove it from New York to Portland in 4 days. Remember when my daughter asked you if you wanted to see any pictures of me in the Army? Here. They had us take a picture because I had a whole bunch of more brass to put on me after I got out of the Army. But that was when I was 19 years old right there.
Oh, man.
Big difference, huh?
Yeah.
When I got out of the Army, I got a fairly good job, and I met Marilyn, and come to find out she won on that show, that High Time show too, and she lied about her age because she won in the 8th grade, and I did too, you know.
Oh, nice.
And so that was one thing we had in common, is we both knew how to dance and all that, and we liked that. And that was a lot of fun. Rock and roll, you know.
Nice.
That's when it started in 56 and 7 and 8, for us anyway, because they didn't have too much rock and roll before that.
Right.
That was a long time ago, you know.
All right.
Yeah, okay.